everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the United She Stands podcast. Today, we have a candidate for Ohio's 6th Congressional District, and his name is Sean Connolly. He was born and raised in Ohio and built his life around hard work, personal responsibility, and creating opportunity. As a small business owner for nearly a decade, he runs his tattoo shop on the belief that leadership means working alongside people, not over them. He considers himself a labor Democrat, which is loyal first to working families and focused on raising wages, protecting unions, and lowering costs, even if that means challenging his own party. He's running for Congress on a big, ambitious idea: invest in America again, starting with a high-speed rail corridor connecting Eastern Ohio to major job markets, and a broader push to modernizing infrastructure, create good-paying jobs, and rebuilding the middle class. He says he's not running to be a career politician, but to refocus government on working people and restore accountability for Ohio's 6th Congressional District, and then returning to what he loves: tattooing. We think y'all will really like this conversation. We enjoyed hearing about, everything that Sean supports, but specifically our conversation about high-speed rail. We think it's a really huge benefit to the Ohio community. So excited to hear what y'all's thoughts are on our interview with Sean. Enjoy.
Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are very excited to have you. So let's start just a little bit by giving our listeners a little bit of your background. Can you tell us about yourself? Where did you grow up, and how did you end up becoming a small business owner?
Yeah, so, I'm born and raised in Ohio. I've lived in Mahoney County my entire life, which is Eastern Ohio. We're about we're in between Cleveland and Pittsburgh, so we're about an hour away from both. So growing up in Ohio, I've had the generic experiences that everybody else has had, and it's definitely, I'm very proud of being in Ohio, even though we're kind of the butt end of a lot of jokes nowadays in the younger crowds. I'm very prideful here because I do believe that it's just like a beautiful state, and you have to go through the Ohio winters to really appreciate the Ohio spring and summers and falls. But so anyways, I come from, a lot of people in my family are small business owners, on my mom's side, Missouri, they own small businesses. Here, my dad's side, they've owned a greenhouse, and so that's always something I knew I wanted to do. I always wanted to build something, build a business for myself. But through that, so I always knew I wanted to do that. And then I had a family member who was a tattoo artist. And so as a young kid, I always thought it was the coolest thing because I always wanted to be the defiant child, and be different. So I always thought it was just the coolest thing, and when I was 18 years old, like a lot of other 18-year-olds, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. The opportunity came up to get into tattooing. So I took it and, kind of went on that journey, kind of just getting into the industry, learning. And I really fell in love with obviously the art of it and also just the challenge of it. It's not something that comes easy. It is something that's attainable for people, but it's something that you truly have to kind of understand and learn. And I love that challenge. And so, eventually I got the stars aligned, a couple years into my career where a building opened up. I was able to kind of jump on that, open up my own studio, and the name of the studio is Rising Tide Tattoo, which comes from a quote from JFK: "A rising tide lifts all boats." So, I've obviously always took from that just one person has the opportunity and responsibility to lift up those around them. And that is how I've always tried to run my business. I've been in business for 8 years now, and I've never run it on the model that will make myself personally the most money. I've always run it on the model that will give the artist working with me the best opportunity to build a successful and dignified career for themselves. Because ultimately, that's what I've always wanted. I just wanted to work around some cool artists and just do this thing that is, I don't know, in my mind, the coolest job in the world. That's how I've run my business. And that's, partly too why I kind of wanted to run for office, because that's kind of been my moral character. I want to lift up those around me. So that is what I want to take into this congressional office, because I don't see that with our politicians nowadays. It's more of, let's just do it for us and whatever benefits me. So
Well, Sean, that's a great one story and two segue. So can you now tell us a little bit about your congressional district and what made you decide that you were going to run for office?
Yeah, absolutely. We live in Eastern Ohio. A big chunk of Eastern Ohio is the 6th District. I am all the way up at the top in Mahoney County. I go all the way down to Belmont County, and then we actually also go kind of towards the center of Ohio, towards Wayne County. So just geographically, we're a very large district, which makes it super fun when you're you're campaigning and you're driving 2 hours. But with it being a large district, there's a lot of diversity. We have Appalachian towns, we have towns on the Ohio River, and kind of everywhere in between. And so personally, where I'm from, around in Mahoney County, which is the Youngstown area, it's kind of what most people know. My entire life, I grew up and I've just kind of seen the decline, and that decline started before I was even born. We were a large steel industry town, and through bad policy decisions throughout, again, before I was born, that really stripped away that industry from us. And we've never truly recovered. And that's kind of indicative of what the rest of the district is like. We've just been written off. We haven't had economic viability that has brought real growth here. I know Dr. Acton always says that our biggest export in Ohio is young people. And that really is the case. We don't have a foundation for young people in this area to build a life off of. And so that kind of leads to why I wanted to run, because, going back, I do love Ohio. I truly believe that this is just a beautiful state. And I think that it has so much to offer, yet we aren't given the tools and to build that future. And honestly, it feels like those tools are stripped away from us through exploitation at the top. And so I was running because I'm 31 years old, and the next 31 years of my life for this area don't look very bright with the path that we're on. And so I wanted to run to address the issues that are happening here now, but also look ahead, and what do we want our economy to look like? What do we want our society to look like? What do we want Eastern Ohio to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years? Because we have to put in the work now to start that journey.
I love that. Yeah, your district, I think, is also, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's one of the poorest districts in Ohio.
Yeah, so because if it is one of the poorest, if not the poorest. We just got, our lines just got redrawn last year, so it kind of changes things. Maybe we're not the poorest. I knew we used to be the poorest, so I just kind of assumed that we're probably the poorest. But
yeah, and like to your point, Appalachia's in there, and just like the fact of being left behind, I think is really important for you to speak on, because it's not one party or the other that has left that area behind. Unfortunately, it's both parties, and we know that, right? It's politicians in general have left that area behind. And I think so that segues us into what I want to ask you about. You are running in a district now that has at least several folks running to be the Democratic candidate. So your primary is full. Why do you think, what's your difference in your platform? And I think it's really different than some other people's running. At least it's different than anything I've seen anyone in Ohio be talking about or putting out. So can you tell us, what is your platform, and why do you think it sets you apart from the other candidates running specifically in the Democratic primary?
Yeah, so I guess I'll state this. I respect anybody that wants to fight for the middle class and the working class people. That's why I got into do this. That was my reasoning. And so I respect anybody that's doing that. I feel what really sets me apart is I see a lot of candidates, they're trying to manage decline, and I'm really running to build a future. A lot of myself and the other candidates, we are running on a lot of the same policy platform, things like universal childcare, universal healthcare, strengthening unions, things like that. I look at that as those are the here and now problems. But also with that legislation has already started. It simply needs backers. It simply needs people to fight for it. So I'm not just running to be a vote for legislation that started. I'm running to look ahead. I'm running to build a future, because I understand that the chaos here and now that we're living through it takes up all of our bandwidth that we have. However, I think it's important to have someone that is saying, hey, we can do this now, we can fix this now, but let's not forget where we want to go. Again, like I said, we need to put in the work now. We need to start these projects now. And so that's why my biggest thing is rebuilding our country's infrastructure, specifically high-speed rail. That's what I am focusing my campaign on. That's what I will focus the resources of the Congressional office on. Because it's a matter of building up our foundations. Talk about rebuilding the middle class while we continue to build nothing in this country. And I do laugh because sometimes, you'll get radical or, whatever they want to call these proposals. However, I'm simply just looking back to history and what we've done in this country and how some of the problems that we face now line up to problems we faced before. And so, I look back to FDR and what he did, and in the Great Depression, what did he do? Well, he built this country. He built the middle class by building our infrastructure. It's not charity. It's just simply taking the money that we pay, investing it back into us, and giving us the opportunity to build our own future. And so that is where I am taking my campaign. That's where I want to take the Congressional office. I simply want to focus on projects that are going to lift us up. They're going to raise the ceiling for everybody. And also, a lot of people think that manufacturing is going to save us, and I do absolutely agree that I want to see more manufacturing. However, again, with what do we want our economy and our country to look like in 5, 10, 15 years? Well, we've all seen the automated robots that they are nowadays. We've all seen how AI is taking away even white-collar jobs. So I think that manufacturing, if we don't put some guardrails in place, is just going to be automated away. So we need to look at how do we create new markets? How do we create new industries? And that's why I really see high-speed rail as the driving engine to do that. You connect these smaller rural markets with larger economic hubs. And again, it's all stuff that we've done in history. The railroads revolutionized our country in the 1800s. The interstate highway system revolutionized our country we just need to do that in the thousands version of that. And that's where I really want to go with this. I just want to build. I'm still a kid in a sandbox. I want to build things.
Yeah. I just want to say, high-speed rail is maybe like one of my pipe dreams. I don't even know if I want to call it a pipe dream because you're running on it. And so it feels like maybe it's something people do want to talk about and could be real. But I have good friends in Columbus. Sarah's on the call, but I have some other friends down there too. And that's like always my thing. Like I love going down there, but I'm like, God, I wish I could get on like a train and like be done with this. Like I don't want to drive 2 hours to Columbus like every time I have to go. And obviously that's for pleasure. But to your point, what it would do for people to be able to move around Ohio, they could live in their small town they grew up in and take a job in a larger city in Ohio where the pay is going to be higher, right? The opportunity is just greater. And I think one of the other things I've heard you speak on, obviously we follow you, and in the rail space is like, not only does it give people opportunity down the road, but someone has to build high-speed rail. So in the short term too, right, there's economic opportunity and growth there as well.
Yeah, no, it creates a lot of strong union jobs. What people, again, going back to the manufacturing thing, it's because those are stable union jobs, in the manufacturing space, or has the potential to be if we, again, set those guardrails in place. I want to look at, okay, we can't just automate, these jobs on building this infrastructure away. We're not there yet in the automated realm. So this is a way that I think is more outside of what normal people are thinking about on how we can create this stability in the area. And so, yeah, like you said, it is those jobs that come here now. What is also leading us to creating a driving force that grows more economic opportunity. Like you said, so my main proposal is we start Cleveland to Pittsburgh with a hub in Youngstown, and then also connecting more of Eastern Ohio. So even somewhere like Steubenville, I would love to see kind of get that attached to. So it kind of connects this whole area, and it directly connects us to larger economic hubs. because when you can live in Youngstown and work in Pittsburgh, so you're bringing that money that you earn over there and you're bringing it back here, and then you're spending it in our local economy. And so what is that doing? That's helping things like small businesses. It's helping revenue start in so many other areas that have ripple effects that lift up our whole society, local, community. And there's so many what I see as benefits, because now, okay, so we've brought this federal investment in, this federal project. Now private investors are going to see, hey, there's a lot of cheap land, cheap development opportunities. I'm going to come in there and I'm going to bring my money and kind of have private development of this area, because I know that now this is going to be connected to more opportunities. It's going to be connected to more workers, more people participating in the economy. And so I just feel as if there are so many benefits to connecting our state, and it's really just about bringing people closer together, being able to, in a shorter amount of time, be able to travel to get to other business opportunities. So.
Yeah. Okay, before we move on from rail, because I feel like I could talk about high-speed rail for a
little
bit.
I trust me, I still plan on talking about it.
Okay. The environment. I mean, there's a whole thing around what it could do for the environment, which is great.
It's just simply better for the environment. I also think that the reason why we don't have some of these projects, or why we don't even realize that as the citizens of this country, we can kind of demand these types of projects be started by our federal government, is because politicians have been bought and paid for. So what would high-speed rail do? It would take away some travelers from the oil companies, the car manufacturing companies. It's not that it would devastate them, but they would technically lose some money. Well, they're going to dump a lot of money into politicians to make sure that conversation doesn't even get started. We have a long-standing history in this country of lobbyists doing things that kind of dismantle public transportation, because when we have the public utility of transportation, that doesn't do so well for gas companies, oil companies, car manufacturing companies. So it's not a way of, because they're already posting record profits, so they can share that, that wealth around. They can do we can do things that benefit us as a whole, that benefit the working class, that benefit the middle class. Everything doesn't need to just simply about how much we can make some, stakeholders in companies, because high-speed rail that's not the final product. The high-speed rail isn't what is going to make the money through, fare sales. It is the driving force that will create the economic opportunity, the development around these hubs, the access to more people to bring money and spend in the economy, because that's simply what it comes down to, is just connecting money, connecting people that drive economic opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say, the fact that you are coming out with just this idea, this thing you're running on, is so refreshing, because to your point, I think the platforms a lot of people are running on are amazing, right? We all want universal healthcare, we want universal childcare, we want union strength back, we want all those things, but I think that those get repetitive, and I think it's hard to get people excited about them sometimes, not because they don't want them, but because we've been talking about them for so long, and I think some people are like, is that ever going to really happen?
Yeah.
And so I think anytime someone brings something that is a new idea, I think that's always exciting. But then I think on top of your new idea, you really have the why behind it, and just what would this do to benefit you? And I think someone can see that picture painted and be like, oh yeah, wouldn't that be cool if I could get to a great job in Youngstown from my small town where I am in Southern Ohio. And so I just really want to give you kudos for bringing that to the table and running on that. I think that's really exciting and really awesome, and it does differentiate you definitely from
and
people that are running.
I do want to point out too, I'm not the only one bringing up these conversations. There are a lot of other candidates. It's kind of funny, the day that I kind of put this out there that this was my proposal and everything, I'm scrolling, and I don't know if you guys know who Graham Plattner is up in Maine. I see a video of him literally talking about how we need to build up our railway infrastructure back. And I was just like, okay, awesome. And I don't know the names off the top of my head, but I have seen other candidates talking about this type of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, there's a couple reasons why we obviously haven't heard politicians talking about it too much, but I think it's also, again, because we are living in chaos right now. Everything going on in the country around us is taking up our bandwidth. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing the here and now. And those are things like universal healthcare, universal childcare. That's the here and now, solutions. But again, that legislation started, so the resources of a congressional office are, a big resource. We can focus that energy on things that, again, truly bring us into the future, because that's really what it's about.
Yeah, so Sean, we really do love the high-speed rail idea, especially within Ohio, and selfishly for Ashley to come to Columbus more often. But I know we're aware, maybe some of the folks that are listening are aware, California had a high-speed rail project that didn't go too well. So maybe if you could explain what happened there to our listeners, and then how you would kind of mitigate those risks with legislation for high-speed rail here in Ohio.
Yeah, and that's something I, looked into when I was kind of trying to come up with this proposal. And a lot of the drawbacks in California were that they didn't have a centralized kind of entity leading the project. It was a lot of kind of different departments, and there wasn't real planning. They broke ground before they had the corridor all mapped out. It turned more into, how do we get a photo op out of this? How do we get a good headline out of this? So again, when I looked into that, that led me to say and to think, how can a project like this get done? And so again, I looked back to history. That is why I proposed that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers lead this project. I know that in modern day, that's not necessarily their wheelhouse. They are more involved in the waterways of our country. However, I see them as the lead, not because they're railway experts. It's because they're experts in leading large infrastructure projects. That's their entire history. They have built this country. They've been integral in building this country. So, they have a long track record of that. And then because I also see that you need a centralized federal entity leading the project. So within that's where, they would be in the lead, and then Department of Transportation would be in that hierarchy, dealing with the obstacles that will come up. But again, they're the ones, and again, looking back to history, they're the ones who built our interstate highway system in this country. So it's a matter of just having this centralized federal entity to be able to push this project forward. They have the resources, they have the know-how, they have the precedent and experience. They have the standards and discipline. I mean, our military is a great military. It gets things done. I just see that it's like a no-brainer for them to lead these projects, because I'm also not looking at this as just like a vanity project or a luxury product or project. I'm looking at this as this is a public utility project. This is national security project. And so within that's where I also see, there's a lot of different ways to fund it, but I also think that when we have the military leading it, I'm operating under basically worst case scenario. I'm the only candidate that gets through. Okay. I'm the only candidate. Congress stays the exact same. That just means that Congress will roll over and give Trump what he wants. So what does Trump want? He wants a $1.5 trillion defense budget. Okay, well, I think that it's something where it's a lot easier to convince other Congress members to say, hey, we're going to be putting this money into the defense budget that's invest in national security. What is national security? Well, that is building up infrastructure that creates a strong nation. So that money is going to be there. Let's figure out how to use that to invest back here. But and again, if that's not the case, there's still plenty of other ways to pay for this, because I see it as something that we invest now and it pays for itself tenfold, over the next generation. So that's really, I think that it comes down to having a strong lead for a project like this. And there's no stronger lead than the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, you've definitely thought through this. I love it.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, we can't give you any questions that you can't answer right now, Sean.
Yeah. And this could be cut out, so I don't want to take it too long, but it is funny because I'm still a boy at heart, because the way that has led me to these things is, one, trains. We all love trains. Two, I was watching Oppenheimer, okay? And Oppenheimer, they talk about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, how they built the Manhattan Project, and that was it Leslie Groves was the general that led that, and so he built like the Pentagon. He led the Manhattan Project because he didn't see it as a science project. He saw it as an industrial project, an infrastructure project. Science was just a part of that, just like how I see high-speed rail. It's not a rail project, it's an infrastructure project. So there's a lot of things that go into that. It's not just the railway infrastructure, it's everything combined that goes into that.
Yeah, you're planning for the economic booms and all of it. Yeah. Okay. So we just talked about rail for a long time, which I love. A couple things on your website. You have a little quote there that says it's time to reward the builders, not the billionaires. So obviously your rail plan plays very much into this, but what else kind of falls under that bucket for you?
So, when I say let's not reward the billionaires, it's more of, I don't know, I've seen them as they've always been rewarded throughout my entire lifetime. Washington can move mountains when it comes to bailing out with corporate welfare. When these corporations gamble and lose our money, Washington makes sure that they're whole. But when it comes to the middle class, the working class, the government turns into, and listen, there may be a handful of people that understand this reference, but they turn into Fred Armisen from Broad City. I'm just a little baby. I don't have any money. So, like I said,
we need to watch that show, so thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, no, listen, people look up the reference after this. I promise you it'll be a lot funnier. But ultimately, our government tells us, sorry, there's no money, when it's like, okay, well, that's because you just gave it to corporations who knew that they were gambling on a losing bet. And so again, and that's where I just see the reason why we have that is because we have allowed these corporations to buy our politicians. So they're the ones that are leading the rules, essentially. I see it as through this chaos right now, we have the opportunity to take our government back. And I say that we have the opportunity because so I'm going to hit on a few things. So this also goes back to why I consider myself a labor Democrat, because I do think it's important to point out the distinction that I do not agree or have faith or loyalty in the corporate Democrat leadership. And I know it's kind of a hard thing for people to hear sometimes, but ultimately, even if, let's say Kamala would have won in 24, we would still be funding genocides overseas. We would still be ripping families apart and putting kids in cages, and we would still be giving tax breaks to billionaires. And I'm not saying that would be necessarily her doing, but that's still what the Democrats have always allowed to happen. And that's also not to say that there wouldn't be, less suffering within marginalized communities with Kamala as president, obviously. But there still would be human suffering, and that's kind of where I think zero human suffering should be our ultimate goal that we are reaching towards, not excusing and allowing some human suffering. And so with that, this administration is doing what we've always done, just out in the open, So people are seeing this. And so people are really understanding that we do need change. We need a better government. And that is why I believe that the narrative and the opportunity is there to really get people to understand that we have the power to take our government back. We can restore our voice. We can restore it to being a government ran by the people for the people. And that, that is ultimately why I want to do this. I want to run because we have this opportunity. And I think that we just need people showing everyone that this is something we can do,
No, Sean, we totally agree. And I love the perspective. And it's not even like anything that's totally out there, but like, let's aim for zero human suffering.
Yeah,
yes.
No one said that before.
Those words. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we have the resources, we have the money, we have the technology, we have everything that we would need to do that. It is simply setting our priorities on it. And when we don't, and I really do believe that an underlying cause of this, and not just a symptom, is because we allow our politicians to be bought and paid for. We want to get money out of politics in every instance that you can. I fully back a complete stock trading ban on members of Congress. I support a ban on their immediate family members holding stock or trading stock. And I also support that it is required that you either put your money or your portfolio in a blind trust or, broad like index funds. Because if you want to be a public servant, what do you need? You need to serve the public. You can't do that when you have all of these incentives to serve yourself. I'm not trying to run to be a career politician. I have a career and a passion that I love, and I'm willing to walk away from that if that means I get to fight for my future and my community's future. And I'm willing to do that because I want to know that when I do come back to it, because I believe in term limits, so I'm not looking to be there for at most 8 years, because I'm in favor of 4 terms for the House, 2 terms for the Senate. I think 8 and 12 years is plenty of time to get things done when you set your priorities to it. But I say that because I want to go back to tattooing eventually, and because ultimately that's the thing that I love in my life. But I see that the country that we're living in right now, it's very hard to be passionate about that. And so I want to set personally myself up for when I do leave this office to have something that I can go to and that it feels meaningful, because there isn't just chaos around the world. I know that our country is set up to kind of build off of this infrastructure that we build, and set up to live dignified lives.
Totally. I'm going to do a pivot on you. We're going to talk about education, because we know it's another big key issue that you talk about with your campaign. What changes at the federal level would you pursue to strengthen public education here in Ohio?
Yeah, so first I want to start out why education is so important to me. I'm not going to say that I was, the straight A student growing up, but as I got older, I realized truly like the impact that teachers had on me, and kind of I can really look at how they had set me on a course that I may not have realized at the time, but has led, to success in my life. And paired with that, my partner, my girlfriend, she is a elementary school teacher here in Youngstown. And so, through her, I obviously have met a bunch of other teachers. And so I've always, had this respect for teachers. But from her and meeting her, coworkers and everything, I don't know. I just see them as such an integral part of our society, and I see them getting thrown under the bus by every, which way. So with that, that's what's led me to really be passionate about strengthening our education system in this country. And education it's mainly ran by the state. They are the ones kind of in the driver's seat. So that is why I look at the federal government as ways to allow states to kind of strengthen their public education systems. So things like making sure that the money is there for Title I funding, because right now when they have Title I funding, they just have to stretch that money thin because it's not there for them. Well, that's the federal government's job, is to make sure that there's funding for these local schools that are impoverished, and they don't have the tax revenue to do it themselves. So I think that that's a good first step. It's just simply overhauling Title I funding. The second step is there are a lot of, it's through the IDEA system in education. So local school districts are kind of forced to, rob Peter to pay Paul. So they're required to, I'm trying to think of the words. Okay. They're required to give service to special needs students. Okay. So the federal government is supposed to give that funding to these local schools so that they're able to do that. But because they are mandated to do that, which obviously they should be mandated to do that, we should be giving those services. However, they don't have the funding to do that. So that funding needs to come from the general education classroom. So they have to take away from other students in order to pay for the services provided to the special needs students. I don't think that school districts should have to choose between that. I think that they should simply just have the funding, because it always goes back to, we are the richest country in this world. We have the money. It is a matter of what do we prioritize? I really believe that we should prioritize strengthening our education, because in a broader philosophical sense, how do you have a thriving economy? Well, you have a healthy and educated population, universal healthcare, and strong public schools. It's really as simple as that. And that is where the federal government can lead us in achieving those things.
Yeah. I love that you said that at the end there, because I think two things. One, back to your point, like we should just do what's best for our people. Like if just on a philosophical level, like we all believe that we should take care of our people, which is making sure they get a good education and making sure they have healthcare. But to your point, it is economically a good policy for both of those things to happen. And that is the part that I think is so frustrating for me, because oftentimes, especially the Republicans want to run on like economics. We want to do what's best for the economy. They never do what's best for the economy. Never.
They do what's best for a few people at the top, while the rest of us suffer.
Yeah. And so that's just what's so frustrating to me. And it's always like, I don't think we spend enough time talking about the economic impacts of a good educated population and universal healthcare. So thank you for touching on that.
Yeah. And it also goes into, I always hear, I disagree that government should be run like a business, because government running like a business means that it's for profit, However, I still do kind of laugh at that, because, okay, so if you take the philosophical, what it is to run a business, you want to produce the best product. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, you invest in your operation, So our operation is educating our people. It's making sure that they're healthy, making sure that they have the tools that they need to build the best product, And so it's like, okay, maybe this thing, it goes back to, let me give you an example. So somewhere like a grocery store, they're going to put out products that they aren't necessarily going to make the most money on. However, it drives other people buying other products, because they're going to go to a grocery store, they're going to buy milk, but then they're also going to buy other things. And so if you take that kind of loose philosophical sense of, so we're not going to make trillions of dollars on high-speed rail, but what it's going to do is going to open up other economic opportunities for people to make money and to grow our local economies. Because, and this goes back to our area kind of being forgotten about, we don't have a foundation for young people to build on. And so, we're very prideful here in Ohio, and we want to preserve our way of life. Well, we can't do that if the next generation doesn't have something to stand on. And so it's like, I look at it as, I'm not trying to come in and make some cultural change. I'm trying to preserve our culture here. I'm trying to preserve our way of life over here on Eastern Ohio. We can't do that if we don't have the resources and the tools to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to start to wrap up a little bit. We've talked a lot about the issues, which has been fun and awesome. Sean, thank you just for all your perspective and just all the energy and thought you've put into your campaign. It's really evident.
Thank you.
Okay, so we talked about what sets you apart as a Democratic primary candidate. You make it through the primary. We are into July and August and September. Why are you the guy for the job when it comes to winning that general election against the GOP incumbent in November?
Okay, so there's a lot of things that I believe lead me to do that. So I will get the easy one out of the way. I won't say his name, but my opponent, when you look into him, he's not a good Congress member. He does not show up. He does not face his constituents. He can't take any accountability for the policies that he backs. He is worth upwards of $30 million. Okay. And so his portfolio is real estate. And that type of financial portfolio is a type of portfolio that directly benefited from things like the Big Beautiful Bill, which cut funding for Medicare and Medicaid. Currently, right now, in the 6th district, our largest industry is healthcare. So to give himself some tax breaks, he voted to hurt our largest economy, and people aren't dumb. They understand that. And so that's, again, the easiest part on why I believe that I could be reaching, the bar at the bare minimum, and I'm still a better candidate. However, obviously it's more than that. I believe that I'm the epitome of Ohio. I built my career here. I built my life here. I've run my business on a model of lifting people up. That's the core ideology behind all of the policies that I back, is simply just lifting people up. And I think, again, through the chaos right now, that yes, you have your hardliners on either side. However, the majority of us are just somewhere in between those people. We aren't just party loyalists because people are fed up with being put into those camps. So I see it as I'm able to talk to these people, I'm able to identify with them and they're able to identify with me. Because at the end of the day, we're all living under a system that rewards the Epstein class while punishes the working class. And I think that the understanding is there right now, and that people aren't just tied to voting for a political party, because again, both political parties have failed us. And that is why I see that I'm able to obviously beat the incumbent right now, because he is the definition of party failure. He's in it for himself. He's in it to benefit and climb the political ladder. I'm in it for us. I'm in it for the working class. I'm in it to simply help us build a future that gives us the foundation to build lives on.
That's amazing. And it's very evident your passion coming through in this interview. And so I think that will take you a long way. And I remember Ashley and we went and saw Tim Walz in downtown Youngstown.
In your district.
Yep, in your district.
Yeah.
And the amount of, I'm sorry, you said you weren't saying his name. I'll say his name. Yeah.
Well, okay, Michael Ruley. We'll just get it out there. Yeah, no.
The amount of booze when Mike Ruley's name came up.
The auditorium.
He is not popular in Youngstown.
No, he's not. I don't just try to stick in circles of Democrats. I think that it is more important to go out and talk across the aisle, because I don't need to convince people that already agree with me.
Right.
And it's not even that I need to convince, the other side. It's just, hey, I need to go and talk to you and show you that all of the rhetoric that tells you that I am your enemy, I need to go to you and I need to show you that I'm not your enemy. And we are on the same side. We are fighting for the same things. And I think because people have been so far pushed into these corners, that people are like, why am I doing this? Why do I have all of this hate and anger in me right now? And that's where I really see that, again, we have this opportunity right now to really take back our government, because that's what it comes down to. I'm not trying to get people to agree with everything that I am running on, because we're all, unique people. We all have differences, and that's okay. However, I think that when they see that truly what I'm running on is to build our future, that is what means more to them than some of the culture war issues that they try to impose on us to keep us pitted against each other.
Yeah.
So let's say you are elected in November,
Yes.
and you have an incredible career in Congress. What is one thing that you want people in Ohio's 6th District to say when you leave Congress about your time there?
That I set the standard for the next Congress member. Yes, obviously, I want a legacy. I want people to know what I contributed. Ultimately, what I want to do is I just want to set the standard. I want to make sure that nobody accepts less, from their Congress member, because that's kind of what has happened. It's like each member that has represented us has just been a little bit shittier and shittier and shittier, and they've just lowered the bar. I just want to bring that bar all the way back up, and I want to make sure that nobody expects less than that.
That's such a good answer. I love this.
We so need it too. That is incredible.
We need a big reset in a lot of things, and that expectation of our representatives is absolutely one of them.
Absolutely. Okay, we always end with one question about hope. But before I do that, I want to give you the floor. Is there anything else? If anyone's listening to this, they're like, I don't know, about the Sean guy. What's your one-liner elevator pitch for why someone should vote for you in Ohio District 6?
So I'm not going to say I have a one-liner. I would simply say, reach out to me, talk to me. I love talking to people. I will, I'll set up a Zoom call with you, because I understand that the narrative of our representatives, we don't trust them, and I don't judge you for not trusting our politicians. However, let me show you that I am someone that you can trust, that I am someone that hold these values true to my personal identity, and that has been my history throughout life, and so that's my elevator pitch: is reach out to me, talk to me. I would love to talk with you.
I will just say, can confirm, Sean loves to talk. We've talked several times before this interview.
I'm a talker. No,
I like it.
It's honestly, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm an introverted heart, however, in public spaces. So that whole part of this campaigning thing has been, a little wild of an experience, but one-on-one, when I'm just talking to smaller groups of people, I can talk all day long. So.
No, yeah. I love it. I was just going to say, there's oftentimes we roll into an interview and we've never met the person, or even definitely like had more than just sometimes like an email exchange of like, hey, you want to come on the show? Or they reach out and say, can we come on the show? And that's about it. And so it just was awesome, like speaking to you
Yeah.
so much beforehand, because I felt
Yeah.
like you coming on, I already knew who you were.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so important because, I mean, obviously, when it comes of like to economies of scale, like sure, talking to bigger groups, you get your message out easier, blah blah blah, to more people, more ears. But I think it's so important that you are just willing to sit down with folks, no matter how big the group. Like, oh hey, I'll set up a Zoom call with you. Let's chat. I think
Yeah.
that's so important and honestly refreshing, much like a lot of other things that you talked about in this interview and everything about your campaign. So I just think that will really go a long way for you, because I think people who are really upset with the establishment, honestly, both sides of the aisle right now, it's
Yeah.
we as citizens, we want to feel, and constituents, we want to feel listened to, and there's a lot of people in office that don't want to listen, and it's very evident, and it doesn't, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible. So
And I think a lot of politicians too, they kind of want to. I want people to know me, know my character. I don't want to be a polished politician that just simply puts out like curated statements that have gone through a review board of like 3 different committees. I'm on there and that's me responding to people, because I think it's important. People need to know that I am the person that is representing them. I need them to know who I am as my character. And so I don't want to be a polished politician. I just want to be someone who simply represents you in our federal government. And you know who I am, and you know who I am through my conversations with people, through my interactions online with people. And I think that it's very important to be transparent and open with people, because I think that we would maybe simply trust our politicians more when they show us that they're human, just like us, So
I was just gonna say, like, I think that's what people want now. I don't think
Yeah.
people want the polish. Like, they don't. They want to know that it's just, you know what I mean? They want to know who you are and like that you are a human. And also that I think that goes a long way because humans like can change their minds. Like I think these polished politicians that people have in their
Yes,
brains, like
I will absolutely take accountability when I'm wrong. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to just be stubborn and die on a hill because I have an ego.
right. Yeah.
If I'm wrong
like
on
6 months ago or something. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, if I had a stance on something and it turns out I'm wrong on something, like absolutely let me grow and let me kind of adjust from there. So
Right. We're all like constantly learning. We're all constantly
yeah,
getting new information.
yeah,
and
Yeah, I
grow.
totally agree.
that doesn't only benefit you, that benefits all of your constituents as well.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
with the more information you learn.
I'm not going to hold us back because I have an ego and I'm stubborn.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I don't care, again, because I'm not trying to be a career politician. I don't want to launch something after this. I just want to go back to tattooing. So let me get in there, let me have the resources to help guide us into the future. And if there's, if we start going down a path that's not the right path, like we can correct that. And I'm not going to sit there and just simply go down the wrong path because of my ego, my pride.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. All right, Sean, last question for you. What gives you hope right now?
So I really think through this chaos that we have right now, I really see this opportunity to take our government back. And it leads me into really seeing all of these things that we can do. The federal government is this unwielding force of power that if we simply had people that set their priorities straight into helping, our neighbors, our communities, that we can do amazing things. And I see that it does feel very hopeless right now, and I don't invalidate anybody that feels that way. However, I'm trying to look at it as, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and that light can be very bright. And that's paired up with all of the other candidates that I see across the country that are stepping up, a lot in this state, a lot everywhere. And when you see them and you see that the values that they're running on, it gives me hope that a lot of us are going to get through, and we can really kind of course correct what our government is doing.
Yeah, I love that. Sean, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We're rooting for you. Ohio District 6 listeners, get out there. Make sure you're registered to vote by April 6th, I think is the date. And then the primary is May 5th.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Sean. We're rooting for you.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
one last thing, we will have your website linked in the show notes. We know, we didn't talk about this, but we know it costs a lot of money to run a campaign. So if you are listening to this and you want to help support Sean and you are financially able to do so, that is one of the best ways you can support him.
And another way too that I tell people, because we've talked about social media and stuff, that even if you're not able to financially support me, which I totally get, following me on social media, helping me, engaging with, my posts, sharing it, helping me get the message out there. Even if you're not in the district, the reach still helps, because we're all connected in some way. And so you may know people in the 6th district, and helping show them that we have a different option, that helps me as well. So
yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Sean.
absolutely.